You know that one friend who laughs at everything, and I mean everything. Someone trips in public, they're already smiling. Their phone screen shatters on concrete, they just pick it up, look at it, and go, figures. Someone says something deeply offensive to them at a family dinner, and instead of flipping the table, which honestly would be justified, they just smile, say, that's interesting, and go back to eating. You've seen this person. You might even be this person. And if you've ever wondered what's actually going on underneath all that unbothered energy, what I'm about to tell you might change the way you see them forever. There is a specific type of human being walking this earth who has been through so much that they have become, in the quietest and most profound way, unbreakable. Not in the motivational quote sense, not the kind that gets printed on posters, but the kind that comes from being repeatedly broken and having no choice but to rebuild, until one day the rebuilding becomes second nature, and what used to destroy them barely leaves a mark. These are the people who have cried so many times that grief no longer catches them off guard. The ones who've been disappointed so consistently that hope became something they hold carefully, with both hands, never too tightly. And somewhere in the weight of everything life threw at them, they found something unexpected, a stillness, a dark humor, a peace that doesn't make complete sense from the outside. Psychologists actually have a name for this. Dr. Arnie Kann, a researcher at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, found in his studies on humor and coping that people who use laughter as a response to stress aren't avoiding their pain, they're metabolizing it. They've trained their nervous system, almost involuntarily, to convert grief into something more bearable. That friend who makes a joke in the middle of a crisis isn't heartless. That person who laughs softly when something goes wrong isn't unbothered. They're people who have processed so much that humor became the only language fluent enough to hold everything they felt. And then there's how they handle people who offend them, and this is where you really begin to understand the depth of what they carry. Most people, when they get insulted or disrespected, move through stages: shock, then anger, then the mental replaying of the moment, then the slow burn of resentment. But the person who has been through too much skips almost all of that. Someone says something cruel to them and they respond with a look that is almost impossible to describe. It isn't anger, it isn't hurt, it's something closer to perspective. Because deep in the most honest part of themselves, they are measuring what just happened against everything they have already survived, and it doesn't compare. You cannot deeply wound someone who has already been through their worst. It's not armor they put on, it's understanding they earned. They don't retaliate, they don't argue, they often don't even address it, and this confuses and sometimes even frustrates the people around them. The person who intended to cause pain walks away thinking they were simply ignored, not realizing they were simply outgrown. Because here's what people rarely understand about those who have suffered quietly and rebuilt privately. They've developed what researchers call emotional granularity, a refined ability to identify, separate, and process their feelings rather than being overwhelmed by them. Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, neuroscientist and author of How Emotions Are Made, found that people with higher emotional granularity navigate adversity with significantly more control and clarity. What looks like indifference from the outside is in fact a kind of emotional precision that most people never develop because they were never required to. But do not mistake their composure for coldness. The same person who didn't flinch when someone tried to diminish them will sit with a grieving stranger and say exactly the right thing. They feel everything, deeply, sometimes painfully. It's just that suffering taught them to triage. Not everything deserves their full emotional weight. They had to make that choice, not as a personality trait, but as an act of self-preservation. Life came at them without mercy, and they had to decide, consciously or not, what was worth breaking over. Small cruelties and fragile egos simply didn't make that list. What is perhaps most remarkable about these people is the way they show up for others. They don't preach, they don't compare pain. When you're going through something, they don't rush to fix it or minimize it. They just sit in it with you, calmly, without flinching.
because they remember what it felt like to need exactly that, and they remember the times no one came, so they come, quietly, without announcement, without needing to be acknowledged for it. Dr. Richard Tedeschi and Dr. Lawrence Calhoun, psychologists at UNC Charlotte who pioneered the research on post-traumatic growth, found that a significant number of people who experience profound hardship don't simply recover, they transform. They report deeper relationships, a more honest appreciation for life, a personal strength that didn't exist before the pain. The suffering wasn't erased, it was integrated. It became part of the architecture of who they are, and in many cases it made that architecture more solid than most. So the next time you encounter someone who seems unbothered when they should be wounded, or who laughs where others would collapse, look a little closer. That person has likely walked through seasons of life that would have broken someone with less endurance. They've made something livable, even beautiful, from what was left. And somehow, after everything, they've kept their heart open, not because life was kind to them, but because they chose, quietly and deliberately, not to let it close. That is not toughness for show. That is not a performance of strength. That is what it actually looks like when a person has been through too much and decided, against all reasonable odds, to still be whole.